If one placed article could land you a $40 million contract, that's not hypothetical. That's a real result from a $400 press release. Today, I'm talking with Mickie Kennedy, founder of eReleases, who has spent 25 years helping small businesses, authors, and startups get seen by the media without the Fortune 500 budget. And here's what might surprise you, and it surprised me, is being small is actually an advantage when it comes to PR. We're breaking down exactly how press releases work, what makes one good over the other, what makes you get picked up by a journalist, and how you can use this legitimate marketing tool even if you've never written one in your life. If you've ever thought that PR, press releases, was just for big companies, this episode is about to change your mind. Let's get into it. Welcome to Main Street Success Stories. I'm your host, Jennifer Koch, entrepreneur, business coach, and founder of Next Wave Business Coaching. My first business I opened 2 days before giving birth to my second daughter. But then I grew it for 20 years. I grew it from a local bakery into a national brand and eventually sold it for a profit. I know firsthand how tough the odds can be. Only 1 out of 2 small businesses make it to year 5. That's why I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs change those statistics through coaching, mentoring, and this podcast, where I share real stories of others, their success, their struggle, their mindset shifts, their fears, and lots of wins along the way. Because none of us are alone in this journey of entrepreneurship, and I want to make sure that you have the support you need. My goal is simple: to inspire you, motivate you, and show you there's a path to building a profitable business. So let's dive into the next episode of Main Street Success Stories. Today's guest, Mickie Kennedy, comes to us from eReleases. Welcome, Mickie. I'm happy to have you on today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So tell us, where are you calling from? Where do you live, and what do you love about where you live?
So I am from the suburbs of Baltimore, Kingsville, Maryland, and I love that it's close enough to where convenience is, but it's not as isolated as where I grew up in eastern North Carolina, where I was just surrounded by hundreds of acres of fields that alternated between soybeans, corn, and tobacco.
So it sounds like you have the best of both worlds. You have a little bit of a small town, but like you said, close to all the modern conveniences. So tell us about eReleases. You have owned this business for over 25 years. First of all, congratulations. You are in a minority. Not a lot of businesses make it that long. And what did you do before you started your business?
So I had finished a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing with an emphasis in poetry. And my career plan was to just transition from part-time waiting tables to full-time. And after I graduated, I realized that full-time waiting tables is like 50, 60 hours and you're on your feet on concrete. And I was just like, I hate this. I grew from loving it to hating it. And so I looked for a safe office job and got hired at a telecom research startup in Washington, D.C. And one of the things they wanted me to figure out was press releases. And I inherited a fax machine, and I would fax out press releases for a day and a half, and not much happened. And I really made it my mission to make sure what I was sending out would get well received, because I was wasting a day and a half every month or so. And I sort of discovered that journalists tend to write in a story arc. And while we had data, we weren't giving them a story. And so once we put the data in a story angle to it, I found that we started getting picked up. Like the first one we did was Caribbean telecom traffic data, and one country was a huge anomaly of all this inbound and outbound traffic to the US. And it turns out that was the country that was the call center for 1-900 numbers, which were very popular at the time. I'm sure a lot of people listening don't know what that is, but it was, you'd call a 1-900 number, and you could be billed anywhere from 50 cents a minute to $8, $9 a minute. You could get a pre-recorded horoscope, and they talk real slow to draw it out at 50 cents a minute. And you press 7 if you're a Capricorn, and it changes daily. Or you could talk to a live pet expert to get advice about your pet, or everything under the sun was there. And it got billed to your landline. This was pre-cell phone. And it was a really, big business at the time. And we got picked up by the Financial Times, The Economist, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Red Herring, and like several telecom trade publications. And I continued to try to hunt down the story behind the data and send it out, and the media really loved it. And around the same time, every time I'd fax, I'd get a few people calling and saying, hey, could you email this instead in the future? And I'd be like, yeah. And that was sort of gave me the impetus to start eReleases as an email press release business. And I guess around 15 years ago, we got approached by PR Newswire, which is the oldest and largest newswire press releases. And they liked what we were doing. That we served really small businesses and entrepreneurs. And they really don't do that because their salespeople are out hunting people that are Fortune 500 and don't blink an eye at spending 50 to 70,000 a year. And my customers are likely to spend under $1,500 a year. We worked it out, and today all of the releases that we distribute go out nationally through PR Newswire. To do it through them, it would cost over $1,750 for a 600-word press release, and through us, it's just a fraction of that price, probably about 25% to a third of that price. The caveat is you can't be a big fish, coming to us. We would take you and introduce you to the salespeople at PR Newswire, but it is a really great access that normally people wouldn't be able to get. And it also goes to your industry, trade publications, and people who cover your industry. And you do have the opportunity to also do local saturation to your local media as well. So it's a really great value. But that being said, I spend most of my time really trying to tell people about the types of releases they should be doing, still preaching the story arc, because a lot of the releases we get don't have a lot of story in them. Our most popular
Interesting.
release is the product or service launch, and it's usually just a list of features. And the
Yeah.
easiest way to become a story is use a use case study. Here's someone that had this problem. This was their amazing outcome. Have a quote by them talking about how easy it was or how impressed they were with the results. And, sometimes putting the spotlight on a customer seems counterintuitive, but actually helps you considerably. And that's a story. It has some drama and, an arc to it that the media really loves. So I really am all about educating people and trying to get them to see the bigger vision of reverse engineer what you're trying to announce to really satisfy journalists who are trying to determine, is this newsworthy enough, entertaining, educational enough for their audience?
So that's really interesting. First of all, thank you for taking us down memory lane, even just when you said faxing. And then the 1-900 numbers, I forgot all about that. That was kind of like pre-Google, right? You would call your expert, your horoscope or whoever. And that's really funny. So you went out on your own and started a PR business, and PR stands for public relations. Sounds like you really you're an expert in writing and the craft of story. It's interesting because I think most of us know what PR is. It's sending, like you said, press releases. And I don't think as the average small business owner that we think of that as one of our tools in our toolkit to grow our business. First of all, there's obviously an art to how you write them. And none of us really know how to do that unless we're a journalist or in your field. And second of all, we just really have this idea that it's for big business. And I love how you said that you found a way to make it for the smaller business. And so to help us understand, how does a press release actually work behind the scenes? Where you work with somebody like you and you send it off to this PR Newswire, where does it go from there? Who sees it? And in today's world, everything's all digital. There's not a lot of newspapers getting dropped at your door. Where are these articles going?
Right. So when it goes to PR Newswire, basically in the U.S., there's a duopoly of press release newswires. It's PR Newswire and Business Wire. There's one other player, but they've kind of pivoted to just publicly traded companies that want to satisfy SEC disclosure requirements, but don't really want to reach journalists. You really don't want journalists looking too carefully at everything there. And they're a bit cheaper, but they don't really reach the journalist. There are other wires that people have heard of, like Reuters and AP, and they're not wires of press releases. They're wires of articles they've written, and they work by writing an article, and then the newspapers license the article to use it. So you probably see it in your local paper, AP, and stuff like that. Now, they do look at the releases on PR Newswire and Business Wire as well, and we've had a lot of success with that. And basically, the journalists go to the wire, and they always go to both of them because they're both giants. And so if you go to one, you're really missing a lot with the other one. So they generally go to both of them, and they log in, and they have industry feeds, and they're very clean. They're the opposite of their email inbox today. Media databases have become really commonplace in the couple of decades since I started my business. And unfortunately, when a golf club company spends $15,000 a year licensing a media database, and they've sent their announcement to 1,700 golf industry people, they start talking themselves into, well, let's send it to financial analysts and Wall Street people because they play golf. not knowing that they're never going to report on golf clubs. And so that's happening in every industry, off targeted releases. So a lot of journalists' inboxes are just chaos. And at The Wire, it's just the opposite. They have an industry feed and they can customize it by excluding keywords in releases that wouldn't be relevant to them. And so it really is, unfortunately, makes The Wire more important, but being a duopoly, there it is kind of expensive. And what happens then is anybody can potentially write about you. We did a release during the pandemic about a grassroots effort to help restaurants that were closed. I think it was sort of designed on the War Bond Initiative. It was called the Dining Bond Initiative, and it generated over $10 million in revenue and well over 100
Wow.
articles. The big people picked it up, Barron's, Wall Street Journal, as well as hundreds of daily newspapers. It got picked up by a lot of the wires, and they just ran with it. And, that shows how wide something can go when it's on the wire and it's widely received. And I think that one did really well because it was a time where there was a lot of uncertainty. We were sent home 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We saw how that ended up.
Yeah.
And we also felt like we were powerless. And so here was something that you could nominate a local restaurant that you wanted to support. And if the grassroots effort was able to contact the owner, you could give money that went directly to the owner to help them keep the lights on, maybe help their staff and stuff like that. And so if you had a favorite place you went to on your anniversary, you give $100. Hopefully we backed by, it's like a gift certificate scenario if they came back. And it really was, shows the real value of having a wire and getting out there. But, we have these little anecdotal stories that happen all the time with clients, one who had never done a release and they sent out a release about their company, which builds waste management facilities, and they got picked up in Waste News. And they were contacted by a couple of municipalities in Australia and said, do you do this internationally? And they said, yeah, we do India. We go all over the place. We put them on boats and we send them out and we hire people to put these facilities together. And the thing about them was it was nuts and bolts from trash to recycling, the whole effort. And they ended up doing contracts for 2 cities, building 3 facilities that was over $40 million from a $400 press release. So these are the potential things that happen. That being said, our doesn't always yield articles. And so that's why I really preach that you have to be strategic. You have to say something that is newsworthy. And sometimes your goal is very greedy as a business owner, but how can you reverse engineer it to really educate or entertain an audience? Because that's the journalist's decision. Is this a story that's going to make my audience care? Why would they care? And so sometimes you have to take the pill that you have, which is your announcement, and put it in the cheese. And so that's one of the things that I tell people is you might have this goal and you feel it's very important to you. How can you make it important to the audience? And sometimes it's highlighting a client. Sometimes it's incorporating publicly available data to show the stakes of something. Like if there's a failure rate in your industry that's 74% in 5 years, new businesses fail, and you solve something, that's a metric that's going to give a little more oomph and put the stakes of why your solution is so important. And so, it is a place where creativity matters, but being large is actually a disadvantage. So many small businesses think, I'm too small to matter. The media doesn't care. But, the media covers the big companies because they have to. They would be negligent if they didn't. But they get the most article shares and the most accolades when they spotlight a business or a tool or a resource that their audience didn't know about. And often these are startups, mom and pop, side businesses, solo practitioners. So being small is not an obstacle. Journalists like to be seen as curators. And if they are putting the spotlight on a small, new, open business, it is something they enjoy and they're willing to do. And so don't shoot yourself in the foot saying, I have to grow to a certain size before the media would be interested in me.
Thank you for taking us through that. And you gave us a couple of really good examples of real world return on investment. Because when I think of PR, I'm negligent in the thought that it's just a feel good, it's a brand credibility, it's brand building. You don't really think about the ROI. When you are faced with the decision of where to spend your time and your money when it comes to marketing your business, you're going to pick something I think that you feel you have more control over. And it's because you're looking for that probably instant, a little bit more of an instant ROI. So I love that you shared, a couple of these stories and how they actually got clients from it. Take us through, give us some ideas of, I think that's probably one of the biggest things is we just don't know what to share. Like you said, you always see PR when there's a new business in town, or when the chamber does a ribbon cutting, or when we've hit 20 years in business, or we launch a new product. Well, for most of us, we're just in the middle of year 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're just building businesses. So how do we get creative, and what are some ways to kind of help us think about, would that be PR worthy?
Yeah. So I think that anytime you can incorporate story into a press release, maybe it's year 3 and you're doing a new version of your product or service, 3.0 or something, you can certainly send out a release, but put a story in there of like, why you created this business. What was, what's unique in your backstory? When the first few years of the .com era, all the stories about eBay mentioned that the founder created it because he was a developer and his girlfriend wanted to sell a Pez collection. And of course, that's how an engineer is going to solve that problem. He's going to create a auction platform for that. There's the reason I think that story was incorporated in almost every article for a 2 or 3 year period is immediately made it relatable. And, see, of course, that's how a nerd is going to solve the girlfriend's problem of getting rid of the Pez collection and getting the best value for it. But, there's lots of other ways that you can do it. If there's something that is trending in your industry, everybody assumes that if you jump on the bandwagon and join the conversation, they call that newsjacking, you'll get picked up. And it's not very effective in that way. But if you are the one contrarian to the common viewpoint. So if there's a position where almost everybody in your industry feels like, yeah, going green for electric cars are great, and you have a rational reason why going green with electric cars right now is not good, getting the minerals out of the ground isn't really environmentally sound, labor problems with that. We haven't solved what to do with these batteries at the end of their life from a recycling standpoint. And also, when a lithium battery catches on fire, it often takes 5 or 6 fire trucks to put it out. So maybe we pause a little bit until we solve some of these. And it's a way to be rational, but by being a contrarian viewpoint, every article on the subject, you stand the likelihood you could be plugged in there because you're the only one who's raised their hand and said, hey, I am the lone contrarian on this viewpoint. And I do have to caution you, you got to make sure that it doesn't alienate you with your customer base. Because I had one client who was so good at it, says, Mickie, I'm getting picked up everywhere, but my clients they hate me. And I'm just like, you got to be careful that the viewpoints that you take do not alienate you from your customer base. But, that's one thing. Numbers I mentioned are really good, but try to flesh out the story with the numbers. I always say that if you've tried several releases, and I always tell people, don't judge PR by one press release, do a campaign of 6 to 8 releases. With a small business, it might take you a year and a half to do 6 to 8 releases. Vary the messaging until you find something that works. And you'd be surprised. People always say, lightning doesn't strike twice, but it often does. I have one client who did an industry survey, and he got picked up by I think 14 to 20 places when they did the survey. And now they're known for their annual survey on this, and they get called out as experts in their industry just because they're the author of this survey they do every year. And I always tell people that, you don't need a huge Rolodex to do an industry survey because there are many independent and small trade associations in every industry. I know the first ones you think of are the big ones. Avoid them because they don't need you. But, in PR, everyone assumes there's just this big one, but there's literally 700 others in the US. Some of them are very small, like Florida-based PR firms or people that went to a particular university. But there are some that are like, PR firms of 50 employees or less, which probably represents a big chunk of the industry. And so reach out to them and say, hey, I have this link. I usually use SurveyMonkey. I like 4 questions per page. So if they give up after a couple of pages, we've recorded their results and I front it with the most important questions first. And I take that link and I approach that trade associate, say, hey, I'm doing a survey. I would love to be able to include you in the press release I'll be issuing in the coming months over PR Newswire. Could you send this to your members? I need at least 100 responses for it to be statistically relevant. And I always say that because if it comes back and we got 80, they'll usually do a social media push or another email push to get us over the hurdle because they don't want to lose that opportunity. Even though you may ask several questions, I generally find the best results are when you do the press release on one or two of the big aha moments or surprises in the survey. And you're going to put a quote in there of why you felt the numbers skewed that way. You don't have to agree with it. You could be like, hey, all the graphic designers believe they're going to be replaced by AI. While I don't think that's true, I do think that those who don't know how to use AI as a tool in graphic design are going to be at a very serious disadvantage in the coming years. And again, every time we do this, I see at least 3 or 4 articles, but often it's not unusual to get a dozen articles if you ask really interesting questions. And sometimes you don't know the question's so interesting until you see this shocking number of people who came in and said something. I always recommend put all the questions and responses, the numbers on a page on your website, because journalists will go there and say, hey, maybe there's another question here that I could flesh out to a story. And sometimes when that happens, we can do a press release on that other question and focus on it and get that out there as well. And a lot of times people will link to that page on your website. And a lot of these trade publications don't normally link to people. So it's a great way to get a little bit SEO benefit from a news source linking to a page on your website.
Okay, that's interesting. So really what I'm hearing you say is, each one of us is a thought leader. We're an expert in our own business. No matter, if you are servicing a marketing agency or you're an event planner or you're a landscaper, you have a way that you go about building your business, what you think about your business and serving your clients. So what I'm hearing from you is we could write press releases just on our thoughts and our expertise. So if we wanted to do this on our own, take us through kind of how that works. You said how many press releases? You said 6 to 8 over a course of 12 months. How often do you send these out?
So it's going to vary. I mean, if you're a very small business, you don't have a crazy amount of milestones, maybe you're doing them quarterly. I also have some clients that are really great at brainstorming and going through lots of ideas. And so they might be doing them monthly. Find a cadence that you can fit to. If it's every other month, if it's, at a minimum quarterly, just give it a try and stick with it. But do put some strategy behind it and make sure you're looking at, hey, I want to do 6 to 8 releases. What are some milestones I can plug in here? We'll probably be launching this in this month. So maybe that's the 3rd release. And, really put your head on and sort of think it through. What could I do to make an audience care more here? Sometimes it's the human interest element, the people behind the business or something cool that you've really done. And, sometimes it's the numbers. Sometimes it's sharing industry blind spots. And I always tell people, what are the things that you can't wait to get to a trade show or conference so you can ask other people, have you noticed this lately? It seems like everybody's paying slower, or it seems like everybody is wanting to work from home or something like that. It could be trends that are industry wide that just isn't being reported on right now. And if you bring that to light in a press release, often you can get your quotes on this subject out there, and that the media is saying, oh yeah, we haven't done anything on this lately, and this does look like something that's happening in the industry. It's a great way to get attention. I had a carpet company in New Jersey that nothing special about them. They had no unique selling proposition. They were just in the widget business, selling carpet. But the thing that they disclosed to me when I asked them once in a brainstorming session, who's your biggest enemy? And they were talking about big box home improvement stores. And they talked about how bad they are for the carpet industry and how they're not really providing a good service to homeowners. And so we did that, and we got picked up in almost all the floor trade publications over a period of the rest 6 months, the rest of the campaign that we worked on with them. They got picked up almost every release, and we continued to talk about that angle from different approaches. And again, lightning can't strike more than once. It can. If it turns out that the people who subscribe to these floor trade publications are just other independent floor companies. Some of them might own multiple locations, but it's not the Home Depot and Lowe's of the world. Those are their common enemy. So by constantly antagonizing that relationship and A, how to market against them, B, how to educate against them, there's lots of different approaches for press releases on that same sort of pain point. And at the end of the year campaign, they had got picked up, of course, in their local paper and New Jersey Magazine, which is a higher end publication that was really key to them, but also like 30 floor trade publications. I was like, none of your customers are reading these, but they put them all together in what they call a brag book. And every time they would go to someone's home and give them a consultation, they'd show them the book. They said they probably spent no more than 30 to 45 seconds browsing it, but they started converting 17% more of those leads because people see that. They see that huge credibility indicator, and they're like, do we really want to go with an unknown over saving $300 or $400? I want to go with these guys. They're recognized industry wide. They're very legitimate, and they've been in business for a long time. And so almost a 20% increase in conversions just by adding this earned media that they've got just by having people browse through it. And that's what happens when you share the links with your leads, you share the links with your customers. It reduces churn. Even when someone steps into a new business role and they take over from someone else, a lot of times the first thing they do is like, are we working with the right people? And all of a sudden they see you get picked up in an industry publication. They're like, well, I might jeopardize my job if I recommend we switch them at this point. And so there's a lot of great stuff that happens with that. You could put, clips of it on your website, build out your media center or preserve it on your blog. Make sure you take screenshots because these pages will disappear. It seems like every time the media changes their CRM, content management platform, they purge a lot of the old articles. So
Sure.
you want to make sure you keep that. But it really does help because it boosts your credibility when a journalist writes about you. It's unlike an ad. And people really, it gives this perception of trust, and they feel very comfortable. The signal of trust and rapport that's created when a journalist chooses to write about you. And that's the most powerful thing about PR. And unfortunately, 2/3 of my business right now, the PR world, is not about earned media, but it's about paid media. Pay to get an article in Forbes, but it's not really Forbes. You're not in the print article. You're not on the website where people can search and find you. You're usually on a section that used to be a blog, but now they're monetizing this subsection of Forbes.
That's
And
interesting.
stuff like that. You never want to pay per article, and you never want to pay money. It's just not the ethical landscape where credibility exists. And at the end of the day, you could get bled dry by getting 10 articles out there, and you're not going to get the real audience from that media trickling through that to you. At best, you might fool some of your audience into thinking that you really were powerful enough to appear in the print version of Forbes, but to me, it's a distraction. And I really feel like the earned media, where you really get written by a journalist, is the gold standard. And that's what my focus is on.
So for those of us, because obviously there's got to be an art to the way that you write it. There's got to be we can all sign up for a PR news, but like you said, we have to pay for that in order to submit our press releases. So take us through what you do and how you help businesses.
Right. So we're all a la carte. You can come in. We have a new customer special at our footer for like $349 to distribute a press release. And a lot of people do come to us with a press release that's already written. That being said, I don't think that you need to use us for writing, but you really should look at the strategy behind the press release, because that's the important thing, what you choose to write about. You don't have to be a wordsmith or anything like that, but the areas to really focus on is what you chose to write about. The quote in a press release is probably one of the most important things, because if a journalist is considering two press releases that they feel would result in like an equal newsworthy story, but one has a great quote, they know at the end of the day when they finish the article and put that quote in it, that it's going to elevate that article even more. And by amazing quote, I mean you said something, strong active verbs, you said it very powerfully and condensed and succinct. If the journalist was to paraphrase what you wrote and not put it in quotes, you would ache for what was previously there because it was said better. It was just said with either more conviction or strength, or it just smacked a little bit. And so that's the test. If you take out your quote, or you have AI rewrite it to paraphrase it, and the person doesn't care, it probably wasn't a great quote. So go back and spend a lot of time on a great quote. Also, because a lot of people are posting stuff online, your collateral matters. And by that, you get to upload 2 images. Don't upload your logo. it's not, your logo's not important. Photos matter. And the great thing is, and this is good for small businesses, people engage today with more candid shots. And so what you shoot on a phone is 100% sufficient. Professional headshots are kind of out when it comes to the media. People don't, maybe on a
Yeah.
trade website, having a professional headshot's good. But for a lot of people, having your product on a messy desk is going to do so much better than having your product professionally lit on blue velvet of, the decades in the past. And so really try to come up with some interesting images, and you get to include 2 of those with us when you send over. And again, if a journalist is looking at 2 stories of equal weight, but one has a really good engaging photo, they're probably going to gravitate towards that because they know they can use that to draw more people in and get people to stick around a little bit more.
So really humanize it, is what you're saying, the candid shots versus these curated professional shots.
Right.
How long should a press release be? Like, how long are these articles usually?
So most of them are between 500 to 600 words.
Oh, so really
There's
short and to the point.
Correct.
Okay.
If they're much longer, they kind of need to be. And so I always say, if you're reporting on complex stuff or financials, sure, it could be long. But I also did one about a startup that had really 3 very strange and different founders. And one was a professional clown, one was like a surgeon, and I forgot what the third one was. But I was like, I got to do a big section about each one of them. That was a little bit longer. It was closer to 700 words. And it needed to be, because they each deserved their real estate, because that was kind of the fun behind that press release, was what brought these 3 people together to start this company. So, there's always reasons for it to be longer, but at the end of the day, journalists are on deadline. They're browsing constantly. They don't want a lot of fluff. And so you want to do the top-down approach of what the most newsworthiest thing is, the headline and the opening. And then towards the later part of the press release, you can have what we call a boilerplate, which is an about section, about company or about person. And that's usually a section that can be recycled from press release to press release. It's just sort of like what you're all about, your elevator pitch of who you are, what you're about.
Is this a good way to repurpose? I always talk about write a blog and then turn it into a couple of emails, turn it into a couple social media posts. Could you do the same? Like, a blog is a lot of times your thoughts. Could you also turn that into a
You
press
certainly
release?
could, if what you wrote about was of significance. Sometimes
Okay.
blogs just seem to be like, oh, here's some long tail keywords I haven't written about in a while. Let's incorporate that here. But if what you're
Fair
saying
point.
is meaningful, you have some strong insights, you can certainly turn that into a press release. Yeah, most press releases, of course, are written in third person. You'll usually have a quote where you can be in the first person, and it's usually, the founder or whoever behind the company that's there. But sometimes it could be the client, where you're talking about spotlight on a use case study of a client. And so the headline is the most important. And you're not writing the New York Post headline yourself. You are writing for a busy journalist to say, what's newsworthy here? Is it relevant to me? It's not like, don't try to have a pun or anything clever in your headline. Let the journalists come up with that for their audience.
Good point. Well, this has been really refreshing, because I will be honest that I am one that kind of puts press releases on the bottom shelf of my marketing kit. And you are brought a lot of great points. It's obviously a long game, but marketing is a long game. And I think we live in a society where everybody wants instant results, but unfortunately, that's hard to come by and can be very expensive. So I really appreciate you sharing the ins and outs of a press release and how to go about doing this as a marketing tool. What is the best way a small business owner can get a hold of you if they want to learn more about your services and gain your help in doing this for them?
Sure. So our website's eReleases.com, and all of our social media is there. I do have a free masterclass that's less than an hour long, where I go through the strategic types of releases you should be considering. And that's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, it's completely free. And I always tell people that's the best place to start, because it'll help you brainstorm 6 to 8 releases that any could apply to you. And I go through the ways of, doing the survey and other types of things that applies to anybody, regardless of their stage of business. And I also tell people that they can call the number on our website or chat with us. We don't have any salespeople. It's all editors. And there's no sales quotas or commissions or anything like that. And if we're not a good fit, and sometimes we're not because there's certain industries that we're just not good with, we're straight shooters and we'll let you know. If you have a release that you want us to take a look at, we're willing to do that as well. You just give us like 2 to 3 business days to get through and give you some feedback on that. Again, that's free whether you've signed up for us or not. And we're just out there to help small businesses succeed and to get the messaging out there that PR is one of these things that a lot of people don't take advantage of, but they could really move the needle for a business. When you have a base of media articles written about you, it lowers your conversion rate. You naturally attract more customers and keep the ones that you already have.
Yeah, well, very good. Thank you so much. And I'll put those links in the show notes for this episode. And I just really want to thank you again for your time. This has been really interesting and I really enjoyed it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Before you go, a couple of things that I thought were really interesting about today's conversation is, first of all, PR is not for big business. I am guilty of the fact that I was not using it as a marketing tool as much as I should. And that being small is actually an advantage. Journalists love spotlighting the business their audience hasn't heard yet. And you have so many stories inside your business that you could share. So stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect story. You have more to say than you think. Your expertise, your thought leadership, your perspective, your client wins, that's all press release worthy material. Mickie offers a free masterclass less than an hour that will walk you through exactly what type of press releases you should be sending. I know I am going to be joining that free masterclass. I'm interested to learn more. If you're a woman entrepreneur running a service-based or solo business in earning $250,000 or more in revenue per year, and you're ready to scale, you want to keep growing, but you don't want to burn out, I invite you to check out my new monthly cohort program. This program gives you one-on-one strategic guidance from me, but then a collective of curated women that are going to join you and help you live the best life and grow the best business that you can. I'm going to be bringing in experts that are in the health and wellness space, in the finance space, because I know a profitable business takes more than just focusing on the business. It also takes focusing on your life too. You don't need more information. You need implementation, accountability, and a group that's going to help you make stronger decisions. Reach out. Let's have a conversation to see if it's the right group for you. If today's episode resonated, please share it with someone you know who's also growing a business. And until next time, go get your story out there. The world needs to hear it. Thanks for listening.